What is up, you guys? We are back and we are going to be breaking down another UFC card. We are going to be breaking down UFC 314 coming up this weekend. We have a pretty good pay-per-view card, so let's get it kicked off with the early prelims here. And to kick us off, we have Nora Cornoli versus Haley Cohen. And with this one, they're both coming off losses. Haley Cohen's only had one fight in the UFC, where Nora's had three. Like I said, they're both coming off losses. Haley lost her debut, and Nora and Haley debuted in the UFC around the same time. And Nora's just been more active since then. She's gotten three fights in the same time that Haley only got that one in. And she did win her first two fights in the UFC, and she's coming off a loss in her last one. But in this fight, I just think that Nora has a lot more finishing potential. She's got seven of her eight wins are by finish, compared to Haley has four of her seven wins by finish, and she only has one first round finish, and Nora has four. So I'm going to be leaning Nora in this one. She is the favorite. She just has more finishing potential, and I think she's going to go out there and be able to get it done. So that's going to be kicking off the card for us. On to our next fight, we have Tresean Gore versus Marco Tulio. Gore is coming off back-to-back wins, but in the fight before that, he did take a loss to Brundage. And then he also took a loss in the Ultimate Fighter finale versus Brian Battle, if I remember correctly. Um, he's shown a lot of improvements in his last couple of fights, but I do think that Marco is just going to be too much for Gore on the feet. Brundage was able to TKO Gore, and Brundage is, more of a wrestler. He's not known for just like this crazy striking, and he was able to go out there and get a finish. And Marco Tulio fought Alex Pereira's teammate. God, I'm gonna butcher his name. It's Yorsi Belagorari or something like that. He fought Izzy and Alex multiple times in kickboxing. He did beat Alex one of those times, just to kind of give you an idea of like who Marco's able to strike with. So I think in this one, Marco is going to present some issues for Tresean on the feet. He does have power to finish the fight. He is a pretty big middleweight as well. I believe they are the same size, but Marco just has a very big frame. And so I am going to be going Marco on this one. I think that Marco could also go out there and finish Gore. Like I said, Brundage was able to go out there and get a TKO finish against him. And I think that Marco's definitely got more finishing potential than Brundage does. So I'm going to be leaning Marco in this one. I think that could be a pretty fun fight earlier on the card. And then on to our next one, we have Sumadarji versus Mitraposo. Um, Mitraposo lost his debut fight against Andre Lima. It was a closer fight. It ended up being a split decision. I had it 2-1 Lima, but there was one judge that, had it the other way, so it was a split decision. I did have it pretty solidly 2-1 Lima, but it was a good debut fight for Raposo coming in fighting a prospect like Lima and having a close fight with him. Shows that he himself does have potential. And then Sumadarji is coming off three losses straight. He's only fought once a year since 2018. He's only got seven fights, I think. He's fought once a year since then. And I think that affects your growth a lot in the octagon. I know he's still pretty young. I think he's only 29. So, over those 7 years, 22 to 29, that's a lot of growing time that he could have done in the octagon. And obviously, you're still going to grow in training, but I do think that that stunts your growth a lot by not actually getting out there and competing. He does have solid striking, though. He is a bigger flyweight. Um, he does have some finishing potential, but honestly, he couldn't put away Matt Schnell. Um, and he only has one KO in the UFC. And like I said, he wasn't able to finish Matt Schnell. And Matt Schnell, unfortunately, just kind of gets finished by everyone. He does not have the greatest chin. He rocked Schnell three times, wasn't able to finish him, and Schnell ended up coming back and winning that fight, actually. Um, Whereas Raposo, he's a little bit younger, and like I said, he had a close fight with a up and coming prospect. He's been more active in his career, fighting not in the UFC, and then he did have his first fight in the UFC. And I think that's a good debut fight, like I said, and I think it's only up from here. So I am going to go Mitch Raposo on this one. I do think Sumadarji could give him a little bit of problems with his length on the feet at flyweight, but Raposo is pretty quick, good at moving in and out, and so that's who I'm going to be leaning on this one. And then our last fight of the early prelims, this is honestly a really solid fight. We have Cedricus Dumas versus Mikhail Olashechek. And Mikhail's coming off three losses straight to Michelle Pereira, Holland, and Shara. But those are all, I'm not going to say they're all like top flight middleweights, but they're all middleweights that have been in the rankings and have had competitive fights with people in the rankings. They've been around the rankings, except for Shara. He's coming up, but he is a big prospect, whereas Michelle's been in the rankings before, been in the rankings at 172, I believe. And then Holland's been in the rankings at 170 and 185 as well. So those aren't easy fights. And Mikael basically just struck with Shara as well. So that's not an easy fight for him. Shara's nasty on the feet, and he just kind of got point struck there. And in the fight against Holland, he rocked Holland early. And Holland's not someone that just gets put away by strikes. I mean, we saw him against Wonderboy, MVP, people like that, and he didn't go out there and get put away. Like, he can take a shot. Jack Della, he went out there against Jack Della and didn't get finished on the feet. I don't even think he got rocked in any of those fights nearly as much as he did against McCall. So coming off of three losses, but they aren't the worst losses in the world. Three losses in a row is never good. Um, but like I said, they aren't the worst losses. And then on the other side, we have Dumas. He's 3-2 in the UFC, and he is coming off of a win. But two fights ago, he was finished by KO against Ruzaboyev, and he himself doesn't have any finishes in the UFC. Um, so with this one, I honestly think that Mikel's just going to be kind of the Terminator that he is. Like, he still wanted to fight after his arm was all fucked up against Holland. And he just continued to walk down Shara, um, literally just walking into strikes trying to find his. And I kind of see him just being a Terminator in this fight too. And Dumas doesn't really have the finishing potential to keep him off of him. And Mikel has big power, so I could see him being able to get in there and land a shot. And then I do also think that him pushing forward, landing the bigger shots is going to look good in the judge's eyes. So if he doesn't go out there and get a finish, I think just with ring control and damage, he's going to be able to come away with this fight. So I am leaning McCall on this one. Um, Good fight to end the early prelims. And then to kick off the prelims at featherweight, we have Darren Elkins versus Julian Erosa. Both are older fighters. Elkins is 40 and Erosa is 35. Elkins is coming off of two wins, but he's been in the UFC since 2010. He hasn't had a significant win against like a ranked fighter or an up and coming prospect, someone that people are high on as of recent. Um, and like I said, he's been in the UFC since 2010, so respect. He's an OG. That's a 15 years in the UFC is insane. The company has only been around for 30, so he's been here for half the UFC's lifetime, which is crazy. Um, but I think against someone like an Erosa, who's just a little bit younger, he is 5 years younger, and he has had some decent wins against up and coming prospects like C-Rod, um, who just beat Rosas 2 years ago, and then he just beat Austin Bashi as well. So C-Rod's a decent prospect. Not like he's a crazy prospect, but he's also C-Rod's beaten. I know MMA math doesn't always work, but C-Rod's beaten some up and coming prospects as well. So Rosa's won some fights that he just shouldn't have, and he is a big favorite here. And I do think with both these guys just being older, I think Rosa being a little bit younger, having some more significant wins as of recent, he's looked better. I'm going to have to lean his way going against Darren Elkins here, so I am going to pick Rosa here. And I could see this one going to decision personally. And then on to the next fight. I'm really excited for this fight personally. I really like Chase Hooper, and Jim Miller's an OG. So this should be a fun fight. But Jim is coming off a win versus Damon Jackson. He did get the finish, but everyone finishes Damon Jackson, kind of like the Matt Schnell situation. And then the fight before that, he was brutally finished at UFC 300 by Bobby Green, just got beat up that whole fight. Um, and he'd been looking good before the Bobby fight, but when you're 40 and you take damage like that, and you've had the career that he's had, I think he's been past his prime, but I just don't think that helps his case anymore. And like trying to stay level with where he's at and not regress any further. Because I don't think you make huge improvements at this point in your career Obviously, mentally you're better, but physically it's just not the same. So I don't think you make huge improvements. I think you're almost just working to not regress from your prime. Um, and he's an absolute OG, but I think that Chase is just gonna, kind of continue his streak of beating up on the old folks. He had Clay Guida his last fight, coming in with Jim Miller this fight, and he's looked massively improved in his last fights. He's on a 4 fight winning streak. Against Guida, he looked really good on the feet. He was able to maintain distance. And then when it did go to the ground, he looked phenomenal. He has amazing ground game. Working with Mikey Musamichi, training with people like that, like his ground game is just, it's awesome. And then in the fight before that against Borishev, he went out there, got a knockdown, and just beat him up for the whole fight. And so I think that Chase is going to be kind of tricky to deal with for Jim Miller. He's a lot bigger than Jim is. Um, I think he's got much better grappling. I think he's got elite grappling, honestly. And he's looked much improved on the feet. I think Miller could present a little bit of problems on the feet. He is an OG. He's been around. He's kind of seen everything. And he doesn't have bad striking, but I do think that once Chase gets a hold of him, that he's going to be able to go out there and get a sub. So I am going Chase Hooper by submission on this one. He's a minus 800 favorite. I think that's I see why he's a minus 800 favorite, but I also said this the last time that we were talking about a card with this big of a favorite, that I just don't think there should be this big of favorites in fighting, because anything can happen in any of these fights. Like, it takes one good shot to the chin and that's it. So yeah, I do have Chase by sub though. So I'm excited for this one. And on to the next one. We have Yan Xiaonan versus Virna, the female Raul. And they are both coming off of good wins. Virna looked super good her last time out versus Lemos, and she's just looked really good as of recent. She's super good on the ground. She's got really good grappling, really good control. And then Yan X looked really good out her last time as well against Ricci. She put on a clinic. And the time before that, she kind of got worked by Wei Li, but that's Wei Li. I think that's just kind of how this division goes. I think Wei Li's just on another level than even just like the top five. There's there's levels all the way up, and I think Wei Li's just on a completely other level than anyone else right now in strawweight. But before that Wei Li fight, she beat Dern and Andrade. Um, and then these two do share a common opponent, Marina Rodriguez. MMA math doesn't always work, like I said. Yan lost by split decision, and Virna won by decision. I do think that Yan has improved a lot since that fight. I brought up some of those other wins that she had, and she even had moments in the Wei Li fight. Wei Li obviously won it, but she definitely had some moments in the fight. Um, I do think if this fight stays on the feet, I think this is Yanex's fight all day. But I think that being a 3 round fight, not a 5 rounder, I think Vierna's going to be able to just get a hold of her and control her and win this by decision. Might not be the most exciting fight, um, but I do think that Vierna's going to be able to go out there, control the fight, win 2 rounds. Yonex might take a round from her, but I think she's just going to be able to win this fight with her grappling. I don't think she's going to go out there and outstrike Yonex. Like I said, that's Yonex is a large advantage there, but Vierna's got a large advantage on the ground, and I think she's going to be able to use that here. So I am going to be going the female Raul Rosas on this one. And then on to the featured prelim. This is a really fun fight. We have 50K Ige versus Sean Woodson. Ige is coming off of back-to-back losses against Lerone Murphy, and then the Diego Lopez one, he stepped up on 3 hours notice. So just total G move, but he is coming off of three back-to-back losses, or two back-to-back losses. I do apologize. Um, and he didn't look great against Lerone, honestly. Um, he looked good against Lopez as the fight went on, especially for being short notice, being able to step out there and do that. But I just think that he has power. He just hasn't been able to find it against the top tier people in this division, like Lopez or a Lerone. He can land his shots, but he can't land that KO blow. And he was outstruck by Murphy, and I think that Sean Woodson is a really good striker, and I think that he's going to present a lot of problems for Ige. He's super big for featherweight, and he's got super clean striking, and he uses his length well. He's not just a tall guy out there who has range. He uses that range super well. He goes to the body, he goes to the head. Um, he's in his last 7 fights, he's got 6 wins and 1 draw. And he's coming off a fantastic performance against Padilla. And I think Ige is always game, but I think that Woodson is just going to present a lot of problems with how big he is in the featherweight division. Um, so I'm going to go Sean Woodson here, and I can honestly see him getting a finish. His striking is just really nasty. Like I said, he switches up targets a lot, keeps it fresh. And so I could definitely see him going out there and getting a finish. So I'm going to go Sean Woodson by KO or TKO here. Let's say round 2. And then on to our main card. This is a really good main card. To kick it off, we have Nikita Krylov versus Dominic Reyes. Krylov is coming back since his first fight in 2023. He is from Ukraine, that area. So I do believe that has a big part to do with that, with the whole situation going on over there. And then as of late, Dominic Reyes is, he's coming back. He's had some good wins. Um, but I think a lot of people forgot about Nikita Krylov. Um, he's had some, he was a good prospect. He's had some close fights with people like Magomed Ankalaev. Let me check. I am totally drawing a blank right here. Let's look at some of his other fights. A win against Gustafsson. He beat No Time Ozdemir by decision. And his most recent fight was a submission against Ryan Spann. Spann wasn't looking too bad in the light heavyweight division around that time either. He did lose to Paul Craig, but Paul Craig, I don't know, he gets sneaky wins just out of nowhere by submission. You can see he's just got nasty grappling. Um, and then he went to a decision with Ankalaev where he took a round off of him in a 3-round fight. And he looked pretty good doing it. Um, so I think that this is going to be kind of a reminding fight for people about Nikita Krylov. And I think he's going to go out there and be able to get business done against Dominic Reyes. Like I said, Reyes has looked good as of recent. Um, but I do think Nikita's going to go out there and be able to get the job done to kick off the pay-per-view card. And then on to our next fight. Honestly, this is probably kind of the people's main event for people who have been following this whole thing. This is a super fun fight that I'm super excited for. Bryce Mitchell versus Gene Silva from the Fighting Nerds. If you guys saw the first press conference, it was basically Gene Silva barking at Bryce for the whole press conference, and Bryce going, "You're barking up the wrong tree, motherfucker." So I'm stoked for this fight. I think there's a lot of hype behind this fight. A lot of people are super salty at Bryce about what he said. Obviously, I don't agree with what he said, but people say shit, and I'm not gonna hold that against him and like discredit him and just completely pick against him because of that. So in this fight, honestly, I think a lot of people are picking against Bryce. They see Gene Silva in the edits. He does have nasty finishing power, and a lot of people just want to see Bryce get finished after what he said. But I think people are overlooking Bryce in this matchup. Bryce has nasty grappling. He has really good grappling. And I know that Emmett was able to put him to sleep like that, but if that shot landed on anyone, they're going to sleep like that. Emmett has crazy power, and he was able to find that shot. But Emmett really hasn't been able to find that shot. I'm not saying it was a lucky knockout, but Ilya wasn't able to put Bryce away like that. And Ilya's, he just vacated the belt. Like, he was just the champ. And people have him going up and winning against Islam. So, like, Bryce wasn't getting finished on the feet against Ilya. He had great head movement against Ilya, honestly. He didn't get finished on the feet. He did get subbed, but he didn't get flatline KO'd against him. And like I said, he's got nasty grappling. He was able to take Ilya down. He went into Kron Gracie's guard. Um, like that's how confident he is in his grappling. Whereas someone is like a John Silva, even Tim Welch brought this up on his podcast, talking about how he's getting put in bad positioning in some of the training camp footage. And then when he fought Charles Jourdain, Jourdain was able to get him down as well. And Jourdain's down at bantamweight now. And Bryce is a pretty decent sized featherweight. And I just think in this fight that if it stays on the feet, Bryce is going to get hurt. But I think Bryce is going to be able to get this fight to the ground and get a sub. I think a lot of people are overlooking his grappling and overlooking the past fights that Gene's had. And so I'm gonna go Bryce by sub with this one. But like I said, if it stays on the feet, Bryce will probably get hurt. Not probably even, but he will get hurt. But when it's on the feet, I don't think Bryce is gonna buy into Gene's like whole thing where he's like all buddy buddy on the feet if he tries to do the whole shaking hands and kind of like showboating thing. Bryce is gonna be locked in. He seemed locked in since the fight's been announced. All his interviews, he seems ready for this fight. So I'm really excited for this fight, and I am gonna be going Bryce by sub. On to the next fight, we have Patricio Pitbull versus Yair. This is Patricio's first fight in the UFC, coming over from Bellator. Um, Long reigning champ over there. He beat people like Michael Chandler. He's got some really big wins over there. Coming over against the number 5 featherweight in Yair. And I definitely think this is a winnable fight for Patricio, but I don't think that it's going to happen. I think Yair is just too dynamic on the feet. And I think Patricio came over to the UFC a little bit too late. He's 37 now. I think if he came over a couple of years ago, when he was a little bit more in his prime and Volk was kind of running the division and they were talking back and forth, that would have been super cool. Come over, have kind of a champ fight. But I think he just came over a little bit too late. If I remember correctly, he got finished in a different organization in his last fight, maybe in Ryzen. Um, and I just think that Yair is a super tricky person to deal with, especially over 3 rounds, because he can go out there and he can be explosive, and he's only got 3 rounds of cardio to worry about. And so I could see Patricio being able to go out there and kind of get Yair down, but it's going to be tough to close that distance with how long Yair is and how tricky his striking is. Patricio coming off of getting finished. So I'm leaning Yair on this one. But I do think that if Patricio goes in there and wins convincingly against Yair, that he'll go out there and he'll fight the winner of Volkanovski and Lopez, just because he is a champ from another organization. Like I said, he's later in his career. He's 37. So if he goes out there and gets a big win, the UFC is going to try and push him to the title because he has the fans from the other organization. He has the following. Um, and so, yeah, I think if he goes out there, gets a big win, they'll push him to the title shot. I don't think it does the same for Yair with a win here. Still think he's probably another 1 or 2 wins away. But I do think Yair is going to go out there and spoil his debut and get the victory here. And then on to our co-main, we have Paddy the Baddy versus Michael Chandler. And this is going to be a super fun fight, basically pick 'em odds. Um, and yeah, I think it's going to be super fun. Michael Chandler's getting a little bit older, he's super explosive, he's got power in his hands, doesn't really use his wrestling. Paddy looked really good against Bobby Green his last time out. His striking looked good, forced Bobby to shoot a takedown and got a sub off of that. His grappling looked great in that fight. Striking looked much improved. Um, and in this fight, I'm kind of curious to see how Paddy takes that step up in competition. We did see even Tony Ferguson kind of start to have like moments against Paddy, but then he was able to take him down in the third and still win that fight. And we have seen fights like Jared Gordon where I honestly thought Paddy lost, but he's grown a lot. And this is his first like super big step up in competition, whereas Chandler's been fighting people like this. But I'm gonna have to lean Paddy in this one, even with Chandler's resume against people like Poirier, Oliveira, Gaethje, just the whole top fledge of lightweights his whole career. He's just getting older, and he just does not have the best fight IQ. I mean, I absolutely love watching him fight because he doesn't have the best fight IQ. He goes out there, puts on a show every time, but I think that might get him in trouble with Paddy. Paddy could take advantage of some positions, especially if he gets sloppy on the ground. And I know people are going to be like, well, Oliveira wasn't able to finish him and he had his back and this and that, but Poirier was able to finish him. Poirier was able to sub him. So, like, I feel like Paddy would be able to sub him. It's just position based. And I think Paddy's going to be super disciplined in this fight. He knows Chandler's going to come out there and start throwing bombs to knock him out. Um, but I do think that Paddy's going to be able to stay calm in the fire and take advantage of Chandler's mistakes. I think he has grown a lot. So I'm going to be leaning Patty in this one. I think this is going to be a super fun fight, but I think Patty takes it in our co-main and gets himself a big fight against like a Gaethje or a Arman or a Charlie Olives, kind of one of those people to propel himself to a title fight. I think with this one, if he went out there and won it in crazy fashion, I could see him maybe skipping the line, but really, actually, no, I can't even see him skipping the line. Ilya's there, Charlie Olives is there, Sarukian's there, Gaethje's there. So I think this one and one more big fight, and he's there for the title. So yeah, Patty the Batty, and I'll take him by submission in round three on this one. I think Chandler makes a mistake a little bit later in the fight, gets sloppy, and Patty's able to take advantage of it. And then onto our championship fight. I'm really surprised they have Volk as a favorite here, but we have Volk versus Diego Lopez. Um, and Lopez has just been on an absolute tear. Coming off of the T City performance, he looked phenomenal. Stepping up against Ige, he looked a little iffy, but just the whole situation of that card, preparing for Ortega at 145, then weighing in at 155, then Ortega pulling out, and him weighing in at 160 to then go and fight Dan Ige. Like he's just as game as it gets. He's always game to go out there and fight. Stepped up on short notice for his debut against Evloev and gave Evloev one of his toughest fights in the UFC. Arguably won the fight. Um, and that's kind of why he leapfrogged him in the rankings, even without fighting him again. It's just because what he's done for the UFC. But similar situation with Volkanovski. He's just stepped up over and over again for the UFC. He's the featherweight GOAT. And I know he's lost 3 of his last 4. His last 2 by brutal KO. And it was tough to watch. And he's getting older. He's past that 35-year age mark, which is, we all know the statistic where they don't count Mighty Mouse, but everyone's like 1 in 38 so after they're past 35 in the lighter weight divisions. But I think Volk's going to make it 2 in 38 this weekend. I can see Volk getting finished too. Like Lopez has power and he comes out and he starts hot and he fights hard the whole time. He's got great clinch work. He hits hard out of the clinch. He throws nasty uppercuts and overhands out of the clinch. He's got nasty grappling. But I think Volk's going to go out there and just be able to be a vet. I think he's going to be able to weather the early storm. He's taken that time off, and I know he is older, so maybe the chin won't be there. And if the chin's not there, he's going to be going to sleep. But I think the chin's going to be there. I think he's done the right steps. I hope the chin's there. I'm hoping that Volk kind of pulls this one out. But I think that if his chin's there, just technically he is just better than Lopez. Like we brought up the Ige fight, and I know I said it was on 3 hours, but Ige was able to he was starting to find his mark in the third. And Lopez did start to gas a little bit. And this is a 5-round fight. Volkanovski's been in 5-round fights for the last 7, 8 years straight. He's been in consistently 5-round fights. And I think that's going to benefit him hugely here. I think Lopez is going to come out hot, and Volk's going to be able to kind of weather the storm and start to build throughout the fight and just put on a Volk performance. And so I'm going for a vintage Volk performance here. I know a lot of people are picking Lopez by knockout, and rightfully so. Like I said, Volk's lost 3 of his last 4, 2 by brutal KO. But I think he's going to go out there and be able to just outpoint Lopez and just pick him apart. And so I'm going to go Volkanovski getting his belt back and hopefully starting a little wave of active champions again. Get his belt back, fight in 2 or 3 months. And even if he lost there, maybe he retires, but just kind of set that precedence. Like we need some active champions because we are missing active champions in the UFC right now. And so, yeah, I'm going Volkanovski in this one. I'm going to go Volkanovski by decision. I don't think he gets a finish. I think that Lopez comes out, maybe wins the first 2 rounds even. But I think Lopez comes out, wins at least the first, and then Volk just starts to build throughout the fight just as the vet he is, and I think he takes this one. So that is going to be it for UFC 314 in Miami. Thank you guys all for tuning in. If you guys would like and subscribe, it'd be a huge help. And I hope everyone enjoys their day and enjoy the rest of the fights. And have a great one.